successfully recovered. But part of what makes recovery possible is seeing somebody who it's already happening for. You know, seeing somebody who used to be stuck down the hole you're in and isn't anymore. And you start to believe that, wow, if they did it, maybe if I do what they're doing, I can do it too. You know, being able to introduce people to those possibilities is a beautiful thing, and that's you know, why we're super happy to be engaged with you guys.
I like something Chris said. It reminded me of something that somebody told me once, is that opportunity is at the corner of preparation and luck. And that's I think what the seeds are all about, right? You know, preparing them, and that lucky chance that we catch them when that window's open, they've got that paperwork, and bam, that's where that opportunity fits in. I think the thing that I love about recovery is that it's such a, for at least for me, it was such a community effort, right? The whole thing, it takes community, or it takes a village to raise a child, or whatever. So basically, I was a child. But when I left Austin Recovery, I mean, you know, from Austin Recovery to Sober Home, to VA IOP, to working at the Sober Home, to volunteering at Communities for Recovery, to volunteering at Center for Students in Recovery when I started going to school, to becoming a recovery coach, to working at Center for Students in Recovery, to graduating as a nurse, to working for Austin Recovery. There's so many things that, you know, were a part of making me whatever I am today. And there were so many things that were involved, and it was so much community effort. And it's such a reciprocal process, right? We do this thing, and we grow, and we try to pass it on to other people. They grow and try to pass it on to other people. And we support each other in this way. And it's the same thing that you guys do for the clients y'all work with. We support them so they become stronger, and hopefully they can pass that knowledge on. And it was a long process. I think the first time I started, I was 22. I was in the Marine Corps. I got DWI, or I was 20. I don't remember. But they forced me to go to IOP, and you talk about the chronic part of the disease. It only gets worse, never better. 10 years later, I tried to get surgery for the first time, and I think after that, you know, it didn't stick. Then it was 2 years later, and after that time, it was 2 months later, and after that time, it was 2 weeks later. And you know, it takes a process, but then there are tons of resources out there, especially in Austin. That's why I love Austin. That's why I stay here. There's so many resources in Austin. But you have to definitely get connected.
Yeah. Well, and I think this will be the closing remark, and then y'all can give it about your business. But you know, we have all this treatment, right? You can come see me. You can do intensive outpatient, which is like 3 days a week of programming. You can go to residential, and you know, I can talk more to that if anyone wants to stay. But what I think is also really important to highlight is that we also have this really powerful alumni association, and that's like what Chris manages. And I say that because it's like you heard from them, it's not one thing, right? You don't go to IOP and you're suddenly better, or go to residential and that's the end of the story. And so we take into account like the long arc of recovery, right? And the importance of being connected to a community where people are fighting that fight too. And so that's a really cool thing that I love about Austin Recovery. A lot of our alumni end up working for us eventually. But also that it's not just connected to treatment, which of course is important, right? You need to like address all the things, but it's also a connection to like a community of people who are kind of fighting that fight together, and that really makes a difference.
Yeah, community is essential. You know, it's the key element. The therapeutic community is the key thing that works. Austin Recovery is different than most treatment centers in that most of the for-profit treatment centers, people travel from wherever they live to the rehab, and they go to rehab, and then they go back home. But 90% of the people who come through our inpatient outpatient program stay in the immediate Austin vicinity, and we've been doing this for 51 years. You know, we have a huge alumni population out there in the recovery community that's thriving. And often, because of who we serve, people who tend to come to us, inpatient and outpatient, don't have a lot of resources and support in their own communities. They don't have a lot of family members, or their family members that are there are done with it. They don't have friends they can turn to because their friends are all doing the same thing they are. Their friends aren't friends, they're proximity buddies. They're people who are just stuck in the same life. And so being able to come and connect with this longer term, large recovery community, we have 3 alumni meetings every week, one in North Austin, one in South Austin, and one out at the ranch. The one at the ranch on Sunday nights is 100 people. You know, it's a great transition from a therapeutic treatment thing out into a larger recovery community, yeah.
It's really hard to get a job to support yourself in Austin, and I'm seeing this as the thing that's looking like a real break breakdown point, and with that kind of a network, how does that go? How do people actually make the transition to supporting themselves in Austin in recovery when it's such a hard thing to do anyway?
Well, a lot of that's through the community. You know, it's like we've got, in our alumni association, we have realtors who specialize in finding places to rent that won't keep you out because you have a felony conviction. We have a lot of people who are running their own businesses who hire other people from the community. I'm meeting with a guy right now who's putting together a nonprofit because he has a phenomenal grasp of job training opportunities and ways to fund them, and a huge connection of job placement people. Most people don't have both. He has both. And we're working on putting a program together to start to offer to our alumni mostly when they get a year. Because the first year of recovery is just about staying sober. Get a $10 an hour job and stay in the sober house and you can support yourself and it's fine. But now I've been sober for a year, which is one Christmas and one 4th of July and one birthday and 52 Wednesdays. And I have a little bit of experience doing this. Now what? And then I can hook them up with this guy's thing and we can talk about job training. We can talk about, and this is all supported inside the community. You know, I get people who come in all the time who've got 3 teeth left in their head. But I've also got half a dozen alumni who are working with 2 different dentists who will work with them with what they can afford to get dentures and stuff. Now this is all built into the community. The community finds resources and they share them with the community. And so you're not on your own anymore. And yeah.
At the last Austin Recovery meeting, there was some discussion. You have great programs. Has there been discussion about expanding your programs to include
I know where you're going with teens.
teens? Yes.
Yeah.
Because adults and they are suffering from addictions, however, so are teens. And we don't have programs in place that address that age group. And working in the adolescent department, seeing it every day, it saddens me that we don't have more programs out there to help that age group where we can make a difference so that when they become adults, they don't continue their addiction. And we can stop it from when they are a teenager. So that when they do grow up to be an adult, they live lives that is, for them acceptable. Works out in whatever path they choose.
This is something that's on our radar. You know, we're in a situation now where previous management was terrible and they killed off a bunch of our programs. And so we're sort of in a rebuilding process. I know there's a conversation going on right now to do a capital campaign next year to build a new facility so we can double the size of our family program, which will also allow us to double the size of our women's short-term program. We're definitely having conversations moving forward. 10 years ago, we had 260 beds, and now we have 60. But the number of beds is going to increase over the next 5 or 6 years, and the numbers of programs are going to increase, because that's definitely an area we're interested in. We just have to move slowly and responsibly so that we don't end up in a place like the last management ended us up in.
I know 4 years ago we opened up, Austin opened up their first sober high school. I know Houston has, I think, 3. And, maybe we could expand that as well.
It's
Speaking
a
of,
gap for sure. She raised her hand first.
no, go ahead.
I had a colleague was having a hard time finding treatment for a pregnant woman.
That's us.
Pregnant women is more difficult, right? to
Yes.
find. What was the outcome like? What was the solution?
So I think maybe you came in a little bit after we talked about it. The good news is that we have a family house program, so parents, moms, and even like dads, if they're the primary caregiver, can come for 90 days and get treatment and bring their small children with
Even
them.
if they're, what if they're
Yeah,
pregnant?
absolutely.
Absolutely.
We have lots of
Yeah,
women
tons of
giving birth.
Okay, I'll get.
And we're
the
opening
information.
detox
Yes,
next
absolutely.
month.
Yeah,
Yeah. We're reopening our detox
Oh, yeah,
next
really.
month.
Directly refer.
yeah.
Really?
13th.
Yeah, so, Austin recovery admissions. Yeah, so,
Great.
yeah.
Working with teenagers, the marijuana, how do you address that? Because they don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Right.
Not all of them.
Well, and just being able to ask questions, like, okay, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. The dangers of marijuana, they always talk about marijuana as a gateway drug, right? But not in the way they meant. It's like, if I'm smoking pot, 3 of the people in my community of pot smokers are doing harder drugs.
Right.
If I have a propensity towards that, or I've got trauma, or the marijuana's not fixing what I want it to fix anymore, and I know those guys, and they don't seem like bad guys anymore,
Right.
then I go start doing what they're doing, and that's the gateway part of that. And so it's really just about asking questions. And, you know, like, I stopped smoking pot in 1980 because I realized it was making me stupid, you know? But being able to ask those questions, like, I have a lot of friends from high school who might have done a lot more with their lives than the manual labor jobs they ended up with because they were so stoned all the time. You know, and it's just being able to, not a judgment around the pot, but how is it limiting your motivation? How is it is your identification as a pot smoker causing you to define your life in a way that's limiting?
So what about the addiction aspect of marijuana? I've heard both. It's not, it is.
Well,
I guess it
any-
just matters how it's affecting your life. Doesn't
Well,
matter if it's physically
And why am I using it?
addictive. Right.
You know, some people are using it for fun. I sponsor a guy whose drug of choice was marijuana, but it wouldn't have stayed that for much longer. He sobered up at 22, but the amount of, and the potency of the marijuana he was smoking was, you know, it's a miracle he could function. You know, he wasn't just a pot smoker. He was a guy who was smoking, trying to deal with some other issues.
Well, right, it's not just the dependence on the substance, it's also the
Right.
addiction to the numbing, right? Like,
Yeah.
if that's the way to manage distress,
Right.
then.
That's what matters,
There's
not whether
something
it's technically addicted or
And that's
not.
why, like, there's no matrix to be like, oh, there's the DSM and you're like, this many
Right.
things are happening, but that's important and it also only gives you so much information, and the point is not to get lost in the semantics, it's like,
Right.
how's it impacting your life?
Right.
Yeah.
The gateway drug has been identified. It's cigarettes, everybody. It has been identified. It's cigarettes.
So I'm gonna stop the Q&A because we do have to get ready for the board meeting, but thank you guys so much for being here. And we've got an ongoing relationship with Austin Recovery, so we hope to bring in more in-depth training about topics that you find really necessary. So stay tuned for more of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.